you need to be close to it to speak so people will hear.
Yes. Which one? Oh, right. This I need to. Go ahead.
But you have a microphone. I'm gonna give you that microphone. I'm not gonna use it.
Okay. I'll use that.
Yeah, because you'll need it for.
Yeah, but I'm going to stand there, right? Remember? So when you are talking, you can. Will you stand or will you sit?
I'm trying to think about that. So I'm still gonna use the bio, even though everybody here knows.
I know they really do. Keep it short.
I really like the idea of a master's degree in critical and creative thinking. The university, I would be one heck of the essays that you would have to write, the books that you have to read. It's amazing. Hello.
Amanda, you okay?
Yes, I do not know.
That's okay. You're here, and you're here before anyone else. So, no, you're sitting here.
Welcome, welcome.
Catch your
Sorry, there was
breath.
some
First, catch your
oxygen.
breath. Catch your breath.
Oh gosh. Oh,
Which one did you go to?
oh my god, so I just picked actually when I went to the Basilica Church in DC, it's quite Catholic version in DC. And then I saw husband and wife.
Okay. When you have time, I need your help here first. Before.
I'll take this.
Yeah. I need to kind of make sure that I am recording this. So, what's the best way to do that? Is it recording? I mean, not recording. Is it live streaming now?
No. Is there no red
I
button?
think so.
Oh, you need
Because
a.
4 people are already.
Oh, so it is live recording.
Yes, maybe I can try going into the.
Yes, yes.
Maybe we should turn it off.
You wouldn't mind if I move the table here closer?
But you might want to turn it on. You don't want people to see this before.
In red.
You don't want to see this.
That's right. I'm gonna. Yeah, you know the link, right?
From the link.
This is the link. I don't know what you see. Can I send it to you?
You're welcome, welcome.
Oh, right.
Someone just texted, yes, it is live streaming now via Ashok.
Oh.
And Dr. Janice.
Okay. Thanks, Janice.
We always wait to 6:15. Everybody comes with their time. Hello, how are you? Welcome.
Hello.
No, friend.
Of course, we got.
Oh, we have
and we have seen this unlike me.
You know, I got it 6 weeks ago. I made it all the way through. And then 6 weeks ago, I got it. How about you?
Well,
No.
man, I'm boosted to the
I
bazoo.
was too. I had
Yeah.
four. I had my first two, and I had two boosters.
Yeah.
I was at a reception here, DC. I got it. Only for 2 days. And it was, got better than 2 days.
Wow.
So,
Well, I'm glad to see you.
I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, and I'm very appreciative of this. I could never get that.
$2 for these good wood. And I haven't shined them since. Are you kidding me? Holding up? Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll give you one tip. If you want well shined shoes.
Yeah, no, I can manage that. That's about it. I'm sorry.
Anyway, peace. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah.
Please don't say that.
Oh, it's I'll get
Where did they come out?
Oh, he's not far. Yeah, I know, one time a year. Yeah.
So you're gonna use both cameras, or you're gonna use this one or that one?
That one's for live streaming. This is just to
Record. Okay, wonderful. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. Well, at least some of my friends are here.
So we want to leave about 5 more minutes?
Yeah, I think 5 to. Give you a second.
This side okay, good.
Marcia, thank you so much for coming. You know, it's like, well, someone for my cat.
How did that happen?
I made a mistake.
have to make it out. Would you like to sing with us?
It's all of my friends. So, if you would introduce, hi, we met them.
Also at the show, did you down where? Did you get COVID?
Good to see you, my dear. Okay, yes.
Well, I will just tell you. My
So, yes.
So how are you doing? Are you still working where you are? Yeah.
I'm the man. The nicest people.
I agree.
Excuse me. You're gonna be mad. That's me the fork. No problem. You're fine.
I thought you could just put this network button and do the record.
We're gonna get started in about 5 minutes. We're about 5 more minutes. We're gonna get started. Welcome again, everyone. I'm sorry.
Yeah. 4 months ago, we were trading messages.
So stop. So now it's recording. Thanks so much.
You say ready? Well, wait for somebody to come back and rest for us. Oh, yes.
I'm gonna be here, so if needed, into the live stream.
Pretty poor too. Yeah. Better than a journalist. Yeah. Space.
That's a little romance.
Two people gone to the restroom. When am I? Oh, I think you. See, I'm looking at democracy as aesthetics.
Andy was the one that did that mural.
Oh, this is Andy.
Andy is an artist that is also, he was in science, he was biology, something at the National Institute of Health, and then he went into hospitality.
Wow.
Can I, let me see.
Oh, yeah.
Good evening, everyone. I'm always happy to see everyone, people that come to participate in our art talks. We get an opportunity to share the artists and their intentionality behind their art, which I think is important to have those conversations. I'm the art curator, Carol Rose Dyson. I work with Tracy Barwick, she's my assistant, and together we have the pleasure of meeting and going through art that people submit and determining what we think the important voice is for each of the locations, the important stories and narratives that we feel the communities need to address, think about, and engage with. And when we saw Ashok's pieces, both Tracy and I were like, yeah, this would be great. We should put this up at 14th and V because this is that community that, not confrontation, but, it's strong and we need to have it here. There are other communities that are a little more, the Busboys, a little more conservative, if you would believe that. And so we just felt that this was appropriate right here. And when we met Ashok and we put the work up, Ashok and Tracy, and we put the work up, it was just such a wonderful conversation. So I looked forward from that time in August, I think, when we put it up to today, where we're going to have the conversation with Ashok, because he's just so articulate and critically thinking. And it was just a joy, as I say, to have a conversation with him. I know many of you already know him, so and he said to make it short, but I think every line of this bio is important. So I want to go through it. So after living and working on 3 continents, he now lives in Friendship Heights, Washington, D.C., or if you want to get technical, just across the border in Maryland. He founded Metaculture in 2005. That's at metaculturestudio.com. For the past 30 years, he's been a mediator, a facilitator, and consultant in diversity and conflict management. Prior to starting Metaculture, he worked with conflict management centers in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And over the years, he's facilitated complex dialogues between inter-race groups in Boston, in Christian and Hindu Muslim groups in India, pro and anti-gay marriage advocates in Massachusetts, pro and anti-immigrant groups in Athens, Greece, progressives and conservatives in New York City. And you mean you survived that? And I guess that was another time, right? The conversations in Boston and in Washington, D.C. And civil society, labor unions, and big businesses around sweatshop conditions and sustainability in industries such as the garment and apparel sector in southern India. That's, those conversations, I just think about the questions, the outcomes, that's powerful. The transformation in the potential transformation, but then those conversations. He has a master's degree in critical and creative thinking from the University of Massachusetts in Boston, and did his undergraduate work in design and visual communications. He has advanced training from the Center for Dispute Resolution in Boulder, mediation works in Boston, Facing History and Ourselves in Boston as well, a public conversations project in Watertown, Massachusetts, the program on negotiation at the Harvard Law School in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And in 2002, he was selected for Lead Boston year-long training, for civic leaders in Boston. For the past 7 years, he's focused almost solely on strengthening values and the culture of democratic societies. I look forward to this conversation. I was also watching Bill Moyers, getting prepped, right? My background is art. I can tell you about aesthetics. I can tell you what that line means, but in terms of I had to get prepped. So my go-to person is Bill Moyers. I know he's, from another generation, but I always loved his sensibility. And one of the things he was talking about was the importance of democracy and the aggregate looking at what's all going on. And he gave a lot of good pointers and questions and concerns that we will bring up tonight, or questions that I'll ask him later. But it was just the importance of the conversation. He was talking about that in order to be aware, is to look at the aggregate, what's all going on, but also to have the community conversations. So I'm proud that we're able to, with art and politics tonight, have the conversations about democracy.
I'm sorry I forgot my guitar, but I know most of you, so I don't want to belabor some of the ideas. But at the same time, we have 4 new people that I'm so delighted you are here, especially 3 of you who walked in by accident. Yes, because otherwise it's almost something that Carol and I could have hosted at our house. But again, welcome. And Carol, thank you for a very generous introduction. You mentioned that Bill Moyers was from another
Generation.
era.
Yeah.
Actually, I am too. I'm not as old as Bill Moyers, but the fact is, when you look at something like what we're going to talk about today, it's like we're talking about a very different era. So let me just, because there's such a small group, may I request that you folks, okay, you can hear me, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, so,
Just want to make sure.
okay, so I don't mind holding this.
Testing, yes.
Okay. Excellent, no problem. So may I request some of you to come up closer? Is that possible? So that, it feels a little more intimate. Is that possible? Susan? Okay, if you don't want to, don't worry. I don't want to harass you, but if you can, it would be very nice. It's just, it's so much nicer if it feels like a little bit of a cozier room. Yeah, Susan and Gopi, just stay there. It's okay. Welcome.
No, it makes it easier for me to talk exactly.
Right, exactly. So, I have to thank you for a third of this group. Okay, so today, as you know, or as you probably know, my work has been put up here since around the 23rd of July. I also make it very clear to people that I'm not a professional artist. The work I do, my posters, I do really for fun. It's cathartic. I do it because, to some extent, I have some design skills. And when I'm not doing the really difficult, serious, and even sometimes messy and ugly work of conflict related work that is. I like playing around with color and words and pictures. So my posters really come out of my need to get some relief from the intensity of the conflict resolution work that I've been doing for 25 odd years. But today, the theme that I want to talk about is not so serious, even though the topic is democracy. And democracy, as everyone knows today, is in one mess. It's terrible. And there are many reasons why it's terrible. I'm not going to go into all of that today. Today's conversation is not why democracy is in such a mess. I thought because Carol and Tracy invited me to exhibit at this lovely restaurant, I thought I would make the connection between democracy and art. Because I think there's a huge missing link about democracy. But before we will go there, just to be clear that we are talking about the same thing, I'll just run you through what for me are my basic definitions of democracy. So essentially, when I say democracy, I'm going to keep it very simple. I'm merely talking about the right of a people to govern themselves. At the core, that's all democracy means. Political democracy means that the people are sovereign and they have the right to decide how they will be ruled. Everything else is layers on layers of sophistication, complexity, but that is what makes democracy confusing. But when we think about democracy, what comes to mind? Freedom, rights, privileges, benefits, and today, especially after Trump, protest, resistance, and all the good fighting stuff. The thing is, while all that may be important in a manner of speaking, it's not what democracy is. Again, at its core, democracy is merely the right of a people to rule themselves. So, why is this important? This distinction. This distinction is important because we have started expecting way too much with democracy. We think that democracy is a static system or a fixed system that will give us all the things that we want. It will give us the Eastern Europeans after the Berlin Wall. They loved the idea of being democratic. Why? They thought, yes, we can travel internationally, we can have American cars, we can have Japanese electronics, we can really live well. That has nothing to do with democracy. That's capitalism. Okay? Democracy is a political system which doesn't guarantee prosperity. Similarly, when we talk of rights, when we talk of privileges, democracy merely at its base only gives, apart from people, the right to rule themselves. It only gives people basic fundamental rights. Everything else is a decision the larger population has to decide to give people. So, for instance, freedom of expression, check. Right to vote, check. Okay, freedom to assemble and practice your religion, check. But not necessarily housing, clothing, free tuition, all of that, or even dignity. I'm a brown man. If I walk into many places in parts of the South and the Midwest, or even in DC sometimes, people look at me weirdly. Sometimes the waiter takes twice as long to come and see me. Democracy doesn't guarantee that I will be treated equally. All it does is guarantee that I will be treated equally under the law. If you want to treat me badly, really democracy cannot interfere personally. And this is a very difficult message for us to understand, because we expect that democracy will give us an absolute equal baseline to work with. So anyway, I also want to make a distinction between two kinds of democracies, and at promise you this is not a lecture on democracy. I just want to get it out of the way, okay? We talk of a liberal democracy and an illiberal democracy. Now, the US is supposed to be a liberal democracy. So are most Western democracies. Because in a liberal democracy, you have the right to dissent. You can disagree with the government. You can disagree with the dominant group. If the white people are the dominant group, you can actually criticize them, make fun of them. Now that is part of being in a liberal democracy, because liberalism means you have the right, no, rather, you have almost the responsibility to be open to criticism, open to satire, open to changing. Okay? So in a liberal environment, tomorrow I can be someone else, meaning I can change my ideas. In a traditional society, in a dictatorship, in a theocracy, in a monarchy, you are who you are born. And your values are the values that you grew up with. Okay, so a liberal democracy is actually a very open-minded space. But an illiberal democracy means the people still have a right to vote, but the majority opinion wins, which means Turkey with Erdogan, Hungary with Orban, and tomorrow India with my own country with Modi. These are very quickly becoming illiberal democracies where the dominant group still gets to decide. And it's not a dictatorship yet, okay? But what the dominant group wants, they get. The voice of the minority is no longer important. Now, here's the thing. An illiberal democracy is still a democracy. Because if you're all Hindu, or all Muslim, or all white, or all black, you get to decide for everyone else, based on elections, or whatever the system is, okay? So, in sum, we are used to seeing democracy as a political system. I have a few phrases that were written down which I thought were kind of interesting in terms of how we can capture the idea of democracy in our sensibilities, in our minds. It's a political system, as I said, but it's also a moral aspiration. Because we think as human beings, we appreciate justice, we appreciate freedom, we appreciate a lot of moral values, and we want to create a society based on it. So it's a moral aspiration. It's also a kind of a salvation for minorities. Because get this, in no society other than a democratic society do minorities have any rights. Or even if they do, they are second, third, fourth class citizens. But in a democracy, even if when I walk into a bar or restaurant in Kentucky, for instance, everybody will stop and stare at me, and maybe the service is a little different from me. The fact is, I have a right to be there. That makes it democratic. So for minorities, at one level, it is a huge blessing. It's also, and this is the part that most of us relate to, it's an electoral spectacle. It's like sports. Super Bowl, every time there are presidential elections, everybody is rooting for one side or one team or the other, and we get so excited about campaigning and everything else. It's really like a carnival. And that is what captures most of our attention. We're all waiting for elections, and in November we have elections coming, and everybody is very clear about who we want to vote for, who we want to support. And finally, this is linked with the moral aspiration. Democracy is a kind of a humane preference. Think about it. In a dictatorship, in a tribal society, where you have a chieftain, in a theocratic society, not only do you not have the kind of rights you might have in a democracy, you also, there is very little compulsion to try to create systems that are fair and compassionate. In a democracy, that is the essence of democracy. So, I'm going to ask you to think of democracy in a very different way for the next hour that we are here. I want you to think of democracy as an acquired taste. Kind of like hot chilies, peppers, or garlic. Strong flavors that many cuisines do not have. If you didn't grow up with hot chili peppers or garlic, it's difficult to stomach. Actually, it's difficult to even put it into your mouth. Now, why am I looking at democracy as a hot chili or garlic? Because the kind of flavors that democracy asks of you, or rather the kind of flavors that democracy has, and what it asks of you to appreciate democracy, are not instinctive and they are not intuitive. They're not normal at all. So, what are some of these? Why do we need to acquire taste? Actually, what is taste? Taste is merely an appreciation of a flavor, or it is even the ability to discern high standards. Think about it. But as children, we all love sweets. I remember growing up in India. Indian sweets are really sweet, by the way. I mean, they are really sweet. Okay? And the sweeter it was, the more I liked it. In fact, at one point in time, I remember I used to, when I was bored, take spoonfuls of white sugar and put it into my mouth. Because, hey, I had no taste. I was a kid and I needed something really strong and sweet to stimulate me. Over a period of time, I went from, those hard-boiled candy, really strong, they're like boiled sugar. Okay, I went from that to toffees to milk chocolate, which is a sophisticated taste. And then today I'm so sophisticated, I have only very dark chocolate. Your tastes also change over a period of time. So the important thing to remember about taste rather, is that it's something you try to acquire only after you have your basics. If I'm starving, I don't care what is in front of me. I'm not looking for the right flavors. I'm looking to ensure that I get something to fill my tummy. I'll be happy to drink the vilest beverage if I'm thirsty. Otherwise, I'm really picky. Really picky. So, this is the important thing to recognize. Taste, when I talk of democratic taste, I'm talking of a very peculiar animal. Most people in most societies do not have a democratic taste. Why? Because they don't need it. If you're living in, let's just say, Kazakhstan, or if you're living in Yemen or South Sudan, what are your priorities? One, you don't want to get bombed, you don't want to get killed. You want to make sure your shelter is safe. You want to make sure that your family gets food. You want to make sure that your children are clothed. And if you're lucky, you want to make sure that your children can get to school. That's all you need. You really don't care about wearing Levi's or branded clothes. You really don't care about having even your own culture's highest forms of cuisine. Same with government. See, the thing about government is, can anyone tell me, and I'm just going to ask this as a question because you folks are, most of you I know, and it's a small group. Can anyone tell me what the primary responsibility of a government is? Primary responsibility. Just yell it out. What?
Security.
Exactly, to keep you safe. This was the fundamental reason why human beings, when we moved from hunter-gatherers to pastoralists to farmers. Once we settle into a place, a farm, a hut, and we weren't running around the place, moving according to the seasons or the rains, we needed to make sure that nobody would come into our hut or our house and steal or burn it down or kill our family members. The primary responsibility of any government is to keep you secure. This is what the autocrats, the authoritarians, the dictators, the theocrats, and the monarchs, their greatest selling point. We'll keep you safe. We'll keep you safe. But you, in order to be safe, this is the trade-off. You follow this culture, you follow these laws, and therefore, guess what? You don't have to acquire new tastes. Because the tastes are from your environment, from your context. If you're living in an Arabic country, it's old Arabic traditions. If you're living in an Indian village, pre-Indian independence, or even according to this, the way this government is going in the next 10 years, all you have to do is follow traditional Indian norms. Rather, dominant Indian norms, which is the Hindu people and their norms and traditions. So you can't eat beef. There are things that you, a good Hindu, according to the people in power, there are things you can do and should do and cannot do. You follow that, the government will take responsibility for keeping you safe. Now, this is what completely upends the entire idea of democracy. Because democracy tells you that you not only can expect to be safe, but you also have a responsibility to decide how you're ruled. Now, this is historically, in human evolutionary terms, this is actually very dangerous. It's like, has anyone lived in dictatorship before? Dictatorship? Okay, I've lived in the Arab countries. My dad worked there for 15 years, and every year I went there, and for about a year and a half to 2 years, I actually lived there. And I can tell you, there are no responsibilities except follow the traffic rules and follow whatever rules there are. You don't have to worry about how you're being ruled or who is ruling you, because you have no choice. The biggest tragedy and the biggest advantage at the same time of democracy is that you have a choice. And with this choice comes a lot of problems. Okay? So
you said with the choice comes what?
Comes a lot of problems.
A lot of problems. Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of like growing up in India, there were only 2 or 3 brands of toothpaste. I still remember the names in the 60s. Colgate was there. There was one called Four Hands, which has completely disappeared. And there was another one that I remember called Polidos. That was it. Okay, today there are about 40 to 50. Shampoo, we had 1. Automobiles, there were 3, not brands, models. That was it. Now, with choice comes increased complexity and increased responsibility. If you choose the wrong thing, guess what? You pay the price for it. And we are in a situation where democracy is asking us to become accountable for the choices that we have made. So, let's first talk about a quiet case. I gave the example of sugar. Sugar to boiled sweets, really ghastly boiled sweets with fluorescent colors and all that, to toffee, cheap toffee, to milk chocolate, to dark chocolate. For a moment, I want you to think and ask yourself, what is one taste that you have acquired over the last 30 years? Or if you're younger than 30, 20 years. Something, and I want you to volunteer to share it with the group. What is one taste that you've acquired? Yes, sir.
Here.
You know
I'm not joking. I'm not joking.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was young, in my teens, Like my dad would have beer at night, and I tried it once, but you did. But then, I don't know if it was because I liked the buzz or whatever, then it actually tasted good.
Absolutely. So it's funny that you say that, because that was in my list too. And I had the same experience. I would take I'd take a sip of my dad's beer. I said, how can you like that? It was like gross. And it took me a long time to come alive to it. There are other things that I acquired a taste to, like dark chocolate, beer, but I also acquired taste for certain kinds of thinking. I'll give you one example. Firstly, I grew up in India. Now, most outside the Anglo-Saxon world, and even here with many communities, the Hispanic community, the African American community, we live in tight, dense houses and spaces. We are always with people. Literally, people one on top of the other. So the idea of being alone was terrifying, absolutely terrifying. It was so bad that if I was in my room and I closed the door, somebody would come and knock and say, "Are you okay? Why are you closing the door to your bedroom during the day?" So it took me coming to the US. It took me coming to the US and being a student and having my own apartment, or having a room in an apartment with another guy who was also in grad school at that time. He had his own room to discover what loneliness was. Suddenly, my housemate was doing this assignments all the time. I went to UMass, he went to Harvard, so obviously he had to work harder. UMass was a breeze in many ways for me. And I found that essentially I had no one to talk with. I would have to wait, sometimes for 3 weeks, to get a breather, to have him get a breather so I could say hello. Now, it took me a long time to realize, and my wife Stacey is very lucky that I have learned how to be okay with being alone now. Because again, in the best possible way, she's an American, and it does not need a lot of socializing. You know what I mean, right? So, but me, I always want to be talking to someone. And now she knows how to tell me, "Ashok, I'm busy. Oh, okay." So that's okay now. I don't take it personally anymore. Now, these are some acquired tastes. Now, we've so far talked about democracy in general. We've talked about tastes. So let me ask you, again, I'd like you folks to think about it. What do you think are the tastes that democracy demands of you? Acquired tastes. I'm not talking about responsibilities like voting and public participation or stuff like that. What do you think are some of the tastes that you need to acquire to function in a democracy, as opposed to living in Saudi Arabia, Iran, or North Korea, or for that matter, even, many illiberal democracies?
Maybe tolerance for all ideologies.
Yeah, this is. Now, can I ask you, is that an aspiration or is that a taste? And at what point does the aspiration become the taste? So, because you're right, it's a great one. Tolerance for others who are different. That's something I'd like to do. But for me to accomplish that, what do I need? That's when the aspiration becomes a disposition or a taste. So, the way I would pick up on what this gentleman said is, you cannot have a democracy if people remain in tribes.
Then remain in what?
Tribes. People have to go across tribes.
Okay, tribes.
Across tribes. Because otherwise, you end up with a situation where all the people from different religions, like India is a great example. We have 23 to 24 completely different formal languages. I'm not talking dialects. We have more than 1,000 odd dialects. We have every major religion in the world. So different languages, different religions, different ethnicities, different races. Can you imagine what happens if a country like India goes tribal? There will be no country. There will be nothing to hold it together. And that is one reason why the right wing has become very powerful in India today. They have played on the tribalism and they have recognized that if you get the dominant group, the Hindus together, it can dominate everyone else. So, when we talk of tolerance, we are talking about not just it's a lovely thing to have or you must be tolerant. You can't just tell someone to be tolerant. You have to develop an appreciation and a love for it, which is very much like starting to appreciate beer when, as a 5-year-old, you hated it. Because it requires changing your palate. Here's something to think about. Imagine if all the groups you fought for in terms of social justice, you fought for women, you fought for gay people, you fought for Hispanics, you fought for refugees, you fought for all these people. If you had to live in a large house with all of them, one member of each of them in that house, how tolerant would you be after 1 week? This is, it's as I said, morally and in aspirational terms, it is okay to talk of tolerance. But in actual terms, it takes a tremendous amount of internal shifting in order to be genuinely tolerant. So I'm going to add, you know what, I skipped a stage, so I'm going to go back. I started by asking the question about democratic taste. Let's talk of autocratic taste. Let's talk of tastes of a traditional society. What are some of those? Some tastes of a traditional society.
I'm not understanding traditional.
So, any conservative, traditional society, what are some of the natural tastes that people grow up with?
The man is the leader, and
Okay.
the woman is
Right.
subservient.
So, a kind of patriarchal, absolutely, that's one. What else?
Children should keep their mouths shut until spoken to.
Right? Absolutely. So, in other words, there is a hierarchy. The younger you are supposed to obey. The key taste is to learn how to obey. Nobody here would like to obey, unless we really believe in it. But in a traditional conservative society, you are required to obey not just the traffic laws or the tax laws. You are required to obey the norms and traditions of that society. So obedience is very important. The word obedience, I remember in graduate school in DC, if you even used it, the whole class would pounce on you and tell you you are an oppressive bigot. I mean, literally, it's such an anathema for the liberal, secular Democrat. Obedience, that's archaic. Another is honor. You see, we've heard of the term honor killing. Now, for us, it's grotesque. When a girl, or usually a girl, but sometimes even boys, they have sex outside of marriage, or they select a partner who's outside the community, the parents and relatives kill the child. That's called honor killing. They kill the child in order to protect the family's honor. Now, that's an extreme kind of honor. But at the ordinary level, there are so many examples where there's someone like Gopi who's sitting there, will totally understand what I mean. When you walk into, say, a wedding or a gathering, there is a hierarchy based on which you say hello to people. And if you take a little bit longer to say hello to an elderly relative from an upper class. Ooh, you have dishonored him. It's so honor is a really, really powerful aspect of or attribute of taste, and you grow up feeling absolutely okay giving honor and taking honor. The other is duty, which is a little different from obedience. Duty is linked with responsibility, and it is the opposite of what we call our rights. In those societies, they don't talk of rights very much. They talk of duty, which means if you're born in a family, you have a duty to society, to your parents, to everybody. And that's almost, it's a quality that someone like me, who despite growing up in India, I am so westernized. I don't mean that in a good or bad way, I'm just stating the fact that I have tremendous difficulty with duty. It came home to me when in 2018, when I was here and my mom died in India and my green card was in process and I couldn't go for her funeral. And she died in my uncle's house in Kollam. And I was very confused. She seemed to be, it was a bit of a shock her death. My siblings were there, and my uncle and his family took care of the funeral arrangements. So I was on the phone with them and thanking them. And both my uncle and his wife just said one word: it's our duty. I had personally, with my aesthetics, my tastes, I had trouble understanding the word duty. But now it's absolutely clear. I wasn't there, I'm the oldest son, I'm the one who should have taken care of stuff. I did it. They stepped in and they did it because it is or was their duty. It's a very different kind of an idea. Now, the only people that I would say are an exception in traditional societies to absorbing all the traits of these are the rebels. There will always be rebels, outsiders in the society. Also, in a autocratic or authoritarian or conservative society, the temptation to rule using force comes naturally. Because it's hierarchical. If I'm on top, if I say something to the person below, he's got to agree. As you said about men and women, men are supposed to be on top. And if they tell the women, no, you can't do this, they are supposed to agree. And that is a taste or a disposition that comes naturally to them. The only exceptions to this are when you have a son or older daughter, for instance, who comes into adulthood and is too meek or sensitive to wield power. There are cases that I've read about in history where you have princes who are unable to be effective kings because they are too soft. The Mughals had a few princes who were too soft, too artistic, and as a result, the empire was in shambles because you needed ruthlessness to hold the whole system together. So, I want us to do a little exercise here. Let me ask you, how many of you, just show of hands, how many of you like absolute quiet? Absolute quiet. Do you enjoy it at many moments in your day? Absolute quiet. Thank you. All the white Americans except Susan. Okay. Oh, sorry. This is fascinating. Every white American raise their hand. How many of you get creeped out by absolute silence. Creep down. Tom, it's okay. Okay, so here's the thing. Thank you. So here's the thing. Can you tell me, what do you think democracy needs? More of silence or more of noise? Sorry?
Noise. Valid.
Yeah, and I would like a tiramisu. So here's the thing. Thank you. Why did so many of you say noise?
Why do we say noise?
For democracy.
Noise is voice.
Right, exactly.
Noise
So,
is what?
voice. So, as opposed to, like, Saddam Hussein's cabinet meetings must have been really quiet and gentle affairs because he would say what he wanted and the others would not. Now, you will never have, say, the British parliamentary meeting go that way or the Congress in the US go that way because there are different voices represented. So noise is something, if you can't handle noise, really democracy is not the right thing to do. Okay? Now but here's the thing. This is the twist in the end of the taste here. There are times when we need silence in a democracy. What are those moments when you need silence in a democracy?
I have my own thought, which is that politicians rarely take time to actually step away in solitude to reflect on why the act they're actually serving.
Okay? So reflection.
What's that?
Reflection.
Yeah, you have to have, you're gonna be in the midst of the chaos, but you have to, you need to step away sometimes to reflect and look at the big picture.
Right. So thank you. So Jeff says one area, I'll come to you, one area where you need silence is for reflection. And he mentioned politicians. I'm going to add one more category here. Citizens. Especially citizens who are upset with the regime. They need silence too. Absolutely. We don't listen. The moment we think the other person is going to say something that disagrees with us, we shut the bugger down. You cannot, like noise will be there because, as Jeff said, there are voices, multiple voices. But without silence or a tremendous amount of quiet, you will not be able to run a democracy. A democracy that's always shouting and yelling is not a democracy.
During judicial proceedings.
So every time a decision has to be made, judicial proceedings. So you mean when you are watching the process, or you're part of the process?
Yes.
Okay. So in courtrooms, of course, you have to maintain silence. So there are many spaces in a democracy, and I'm going to add one space. Even the public square, you need an enormous amount of quiet. I'm not going to use the word silence all the time. Sometimes you need enormous quiet, even in an argument. And we have tremendous difficulty doing that. So, noise, democracy comes with noise. But a democracy that hasn't cultivated the citizens who have not cultivated the taste for quiet will destroy the democracy. We will all be shouting at the same time. I'll give you one example. I mean, and someone like Jeff or even Gopi can resonate with this. The work I did in India had to do with multi-stakeholder consensus building and public disputes. And once we tried getting involved with one of the big issues in the late 90s, 2010s, which was on biotech seeds and genetically modified vegetables. This was a huge thing in India at that point in time. And of course, finally, despite all the groundwork we did, we never got our project going. But we watched a process that the federal minister, the central minister for environment, put in place a public town hall meeting in Bangalore. He also took it to 6 other cities in the country to bring pro biotech activists and anti-biotech activists. He tried to facilitate this conversation. He was a very educated, sophisticated guy from Harvard. Then he became a politician in India. So he kind of figured, and Jeff and I can laugh at this, because look, I'm from Harvard, so I know everything there is about facilitation. So I have to tell you, I have never felt so sorry for anyone until Liz Truss came along. You know, the British Prime Minister, and my heart goes out to her situation. Anyway, this gentleman, his name is Jairam Ramesh, very bright guy, very well intentioned at that point in time. He had this huge auditorium, had a wonderful process in place, people signing, getting labels as to which side they stood on, everything. And the moment he opened up the conversation, everybody started shouting at the same time. People thought that was what democracy meant. If you're saying something I don't like you, democracy is me shutting you down. And guess what? After 6 such meetings across the country, he stopped the process. The people no longer had a voice in this decision making. So, there are quite a few democratic tastes we have to acquire. I say acquire because we are not born with this. Remember, conservative societies, traditional society, and we all come from them. Our ancestry, every one of our ancestry is traditional conservative. We are not used to sharing space. We are not used to sharing power. Democracy is all about sharing power. We are not used to, as you said, listening to those we disagree with. We are not used to communicating, negotiating, compromising. Today, activists think the purer they are, the more inflexible they are, the more powerful and moral they are. If you want to be moral, create your own dictatorship. Democracy is not for the morally self-righteous. Democracy is for those who can compromise. Because you have to get along with people and you have to make decisions with people who don't agree with you. You have to have the patience to build trust with angry people. And you have to invest your own time and energy in the public good. So I'm going to stop here because I want to leave some time for questions. I know that some of you have been looking at your watches. Thank you for gently or not so gently telling me. As I said, I've been doing this for so long that I can't stop, really. Thank you. I'm going to, are there questions or would you like to ask any questions first?
You know, I'm gathering them in my mind.
So do that.
Give me a minute.
Yeah. So anyone, any questions to kick the conversation off? Carol has some of her own. Yes, Jeff.
I'm very shy. So, if I was understanding you right, I mean, you really got the wheels turned in my own, and I work on democracy reform. In authoritarian systems, the values are honor,
Duty, obedience, amongst others also.
which is interesting to me because those can have very positive connotations. Now, if you think about, and you think of various things, in faith traditions, honor, obedience, and duty are the hallmarks of, honor the father and mother, obedience to God, duty to the common, to servants. Those are the hallmarks of the U.S. military that is, as you said, and I'm not sure I totally agree, the number one purpose of government is to keep us safe. I would also say part of the purpose of government is to govern ourselves, keep us safe from ourselves in some ways. But I'm just saying, honor, duty, and obedience can be beyond, can be good.
Absolutely, I'm not suggesting
So,
you're wrong.
yeah,
I'm
there's
just making a
also
distinction
this
between
this
these
is
two.
maybe where it ties in with art. It's the art of how something is done,
Right.
and the judgment of it. That makes it, and I don't like putting these in this way, but good or bad. You can have a, as I said, benevolent dictatorship, and you can have a horrible democracy that's mob rule.
Absolutely, and I just want to be very clear. When I talk of conservative, I'm not talking of something bad. I'm contrasting two different kinds of systems. Because those values, honor, duty, and obedience, I agree with you. It's taken me a long time. I gave the example of my uncle. It is as I get older that I'm realizing that there is value in conservative values. Okay, but inherently, I have been fighting for and working towards democracy. Okay, so any questions, or Carol, are you ready with one?
I'm looking at the framework of privilege. I'm looking at the framework of colonialism. I'm looking at all of these things that are being deconstructed in these days in education, and I'm thinking about these structures within the framework of what you said in terms of traditional and not in the liberal and illiberal democracies. And I guess I guess my question is that the narrative of democracy is structured by those who have the power, and hopefully those that have the power are benevolent and were ruled, and the people have the duty and the taste to to be responsible to creating structures that allow them to expand their humanity rather than conforming to someone else's thought.
So is that a statement or a question? It's a lovely statement.
I don't know, I'm putting it together.
Okay, got it. I hear you.
So,
What do I think of that?
but at the same time, that when we go to school, when we go to public school, Catholic school, private school, Montessori school, whatever, but not, we have those structures and frameworks, but hopefully at the same time, those are a base to encourage thought. That's that critical thinking, right? That we don't have in all these structures. Let me give you this back. As I said, I'm thinking, it's shifting.
Take your time, come up with a question, but I want to respond to your thought,
Okay.
which is a really important one. You started by talking about deconstruction of colonization, imperialism, systemic racism. All these things have been happening ever since the 1960s in a very, very major way. There is almost nothing that hasn't been deconstructed, particularly after Foucault and Derrida got it going in France in the 50s and 60s. So deconstruction has happened. Now, let me put it this way. Everything that they're talking about is true. Here's the problem. Democracy is not designed to be a perfect system. There will always be, and one of my new projects is I'm working on something called the 12 Laws of Democracy and Pluralism.
And what they are, what are they?
That's why you'll have to call me again to give another talk. Because that's very complicated. That'll take me 3 hours to talk about it. My course is an 18-hour course on that subject. So the 12 laws of democracy and pluralism I suggest, make it very clear that you cannot escape power. Remember, if security is the primary function, even though there are many others you can tack on, you cannot give security without power. If you do, I can't walk on the street in a dark alleyway if I'm not either really big-willed, if there are 5 of me, or I'm not packing a pistol. I can't. It's stupid. Imagine protecting a country. Imagine protecting a city. You need power. Now, whenever there is power, power will lend itself to being abused. So here's something else. You cannot expect benevolent philosopher kings who will rule completely uncorrupted. It's human nature. Now, particularly after the World War II and all our aspirations for perfect societies and perfect universal human rights, we should know this. Human beings, even if any one of you was given 100% power or 50% power, you and I would get corrupted. It's simple. There are multiple reasons for in psychological terms and in evolutionary terms of why that happens. Okay, some of us may believe we've transcended that. We are superior beings. We are not capable of corruption. But give us power and we will use it. That's one. Second, get this. If you really want a perfect system, there are 3 examples to follow. First one is fascism. Fascism is designed to be a perfect system. Communism is designed to be a perfect system. Islamic theocracy is designed to be perfect. I have worked with Muslim, I don't want to say extremists, extremely orthodox Muslims who say, unless the whole world is Islamic, there will be no peace on the earth. Because only Islam can create peace. The same is true of communism. Died in the world, communists will tell you the same thing. Stalin made a couple of mistakes. That 50 million people died under his watch is a different matter. Okay, but if you want perfect systems, these are the 3 examples of the last 20th, 21st century. Democracy is a compromise. It means I will never get what I want. I will never. And I give this example, it will not be a happy example for many of you. But because each one of us is conscious of our lack of privilege, of the struggles we have personally, the things that we lost out on, our children lost out on. But get this, sitting in the US, I, as a brown man who's not a citizen, have the kind of rights that I can't get in most parts of the world. I can stand here in Washington, D.C., the capital, and give a talk like this and say anything that I want about Trump or Biden, and there are no consequences. That is the bare minimum that a democracy can give me. It can't ensure that you might, I don't know, maybe poor Connor is just innocently eating his food there. But let's just say, Connor, you're from Virginia, right?
Yes.
Oh, you came from Texas. You're from Texas. Now, let's say you are having a barbecue in your uncle's house or your grandmother's house, and I show up there, and they look weirdly and they say, India, is it where you have elephants and you people don't have drinking water and you're all poor? If they say that to me, they have a right to say that. I cannot expect that I'll be treated equally wherever I go. But at the same time, if they do anything physically to me, I can call 911. That is the minimum that a democracy can give you. Any other questions?
I have another. So, in listening to all this, the stories that you have here in the United States, in India, and other parts of the world, what has your journey been from your birth country to the present moment? As I look at, as you say, on these 3 continents, that has driven you to focus on democracy?
What a great question. Great question, and I don't want to bore you guys, and I'm going to keep it very, very tight. I can, without reservation, say I have been more free in my life, and I've exercised my freedom more than any of my peers. I changed my careers 5 times, coming from a generation in India where you don't even change your career once, because your parents and everyone will pounce on you if you did that. I changed my city so many times I've lost count. I changed my country 5 times. Before I got finally married and settled, I changed girlfriends too many times to be respectable. Okay? Now, all of this, I experienced freedom despite growing up in a conservative, extremely orthodox environment in the 1960s, 70s, 80s in India. I broke every rule, every norm in my family and very often in society. And here's the thing, it took me a long time. This is why I do this work. I realized in the process, I gained so much, but I destroyed my family. I caused immeasurable harm to my own society, and I'm part of the problem. In trying to exercise my freedoms, my rights with enormous vehemence, I did that not taking into consideration the vulnerable, sensitive family that I was part of. I don't mean nuclear, extended family. Indian families are 250 people. For a wedding, you have 1,000 people, and that's a small wedding. So I really took a hammer and a tongue at those systems. I was living in sin with my girlfriend in Bangalore in the 80s. Can you imagine the impact on people around who came from that traditional society? And I would attack anyone who criticized me, because I was, in my mind, I was a free, liberal person. Today, and the book that I'm writing is really on this. I am trying to draw a parallel between how America destroyed its democracy with too much noise, too much voice, too little compromise, too many freedoms, too many rights, to the way I did the same thing. But I'm not American. I was Indian. I did it without American help. But the fact is, thank you for asking, for me, at the end of the day, I'm responsible for my freedom and for your freedom. If I only focus on my freedom, I'm not being democratic, I'm being selfish. Yes, sir.
So I understand the narrative that democracy is an acquired taste. You mentioned it, analogous to alcohol, to vices like garlic, and I would see that as if there's too much alcohol, that's a problem, right? Too much garlic, that's a recipe. So it's the thesis that democracy, conservatism, cannot be mutually exclusive. You need a balance, like you had mentioned the rulers that are too liberal. The benefactors are too much liberalism, and thus they couldn't, command the army and all those other things. So is it such that we're too liberal today, everyone is too in it for themselves, and we need to get back to one of those conservative values in a balance?
Absolutely. The word I've been using is compromise so far, but thank you for adding the word balance. And these are not fashionable terms today, because it's all about not just what I want, but my group wants. If I'm from this subsect or sect, whether it's gender, sexuality, ethnic, race, it doesn't matter, political ideology, I'm Randian, it doesn't matter what it is. Then it prevents me from looking at anyone else. In which case, and I say this to people, if you don't want this, you don't need democracy. Try to take power and overthrow the government and run your own state. That benefits your people more than anyone else. Historically, human beings have always done that. If you want a society where Hispanics, for instance, or brown South Asians are on top, carve out your own state. But if you want democracy, you can't not compromise. I can give you, in the courses that I teach, because we have 18 hours, we go through a lot of examples. There are a lot of the issues that we think, like abortion, the hijab, capital punishment, things that the border wall, we look at it in very narrow political terms. But if you look at it in terms of how do you keep a country together, a democratic country which is so fragile, there is, incidentally, Saddam Hussein's dictatorship was much stronger than America today. The difference was American military was stronger than his military. But as a state, Saddam Hussein's Iraq was 100 times stronger than a state like the USA, where you can't even talk to the person next to you anymore. Because, you disagree. They're blue and red and purple and who knows what else. Congress is dysfunctional. Saddam Hussein's cabinet meetings were blissful. So, here's the thing. If we want this democracy, then it's very important for us to be able to compromise with the people that we even hate. I'm not saying don't hate, but recognize you have to talk with them. So, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for coming. And, I'm sorry, Tom has been waiting to ask the question. My apologies. Yes, sir.
Is there a single democratic society that you think has the highest odds to survive?
I would have said 10 years ago the US, but today I would say no. And I'll tell you why. It looks like Scandinavian countries are so beautiful. They are beautiful only because of NATO protecting them. Because if Russia sneezes, Russia can destroy Finland, Sweden and those countries. If China wants, China can make life very miserable for Western Europe. There are no, if China wants, it can make life miserable for New Zealand, for instance. Everyone's favorite place to immigrate to, New Zealand. It doesn't stand a chance because these are not secure countries. They are dependent on American might. And America is fragile. So I would love to be able to say Denmark or something. But if you really follow geopolitics right now, and if you follow what's happening in countries like Denmark, you will see that after the Syrian crisis, their human rights are taking a backseat. They don't want refugees. They don't want Muslim refugees anymore. Even in their cities, they are telling in apartment blocks in Denmark, they are saying no more than, 10 or 20% of outsiders can live in an apartment block, otherwise it becomes a ghetto. And so there are no really stable democratic countries. That is the tragedy of democracy. I want to really thank Carol and Assistant Curator Tracy. For giving me this opportunity, and I also want to thank Busboys and Poets, and I want to extend an invitation to Carol and Busboys and Poets that this is such an important topic. I don't mean democracy as an acquired taste, but democracy itself. And I would be very happy to extend my services or my time pro bono if you wanted to run programs here. I can't think of anything more interesting for your population. This is such a political space, so I would love to be able to help you.
I felt this topic was extraordinarily important because I think we're all bombarded on a daily basis of various narratives that constantly scare me to death. And so, based upon being a child of the 60s and 70s, going through the civil rights movement, of seeing, I was a little kid when John F. Kennedy was shot. I went through Martin Luther King being shot in the assassination. I went through the Vietnam War. I went through all of these things and always thought, especially as a senior in high school, that Robert Kennedy's "To Seek a Newer World" was a mantra, or seek a better world. One person could make a difference, and I always saw something better. And then I come to being this age, and I'm concerned, deeply concerned, and I felt that this conversation tonight, and I think that in doing the research, this is the other thing, civics class, we had to read different thought. I don't know if they have civics class anymore, but I think that there's that responsibility of understanding the government, of understanding laws. And I think there are a number of people that are in politics that miss that instruction. But all this is to say, one of the things that I heard Bill Moyers, yes, I'm a fan of Bill Moyers and Dan Rather, and a number of contemporary people today as well. But I learned them as a kid. I trusted them as a kid. And they've seen what I've seen, but through different eyes, of course. But one of the things that Bill Moyers left on me was, are we now at a time, though at a juncture in a contemporary, in American society, where it is time to rethink democracy, what is the changes that are required to have democracy? Are we ready? Are we able to do that? Rather than talking about civil war amongst people, rather than talking about all of this fear, are we ready to step up as individuals to, I guess that word comes back again, to create this newer world, to create this better world, individually and collectively, and that starts by reading. And you say, well, we can read stuff from certain news people, but still it is upon us, it is incumbent upon us to seek the truth, right? Not whose truth, but the truth. And then I guess that's another complexity. But I'm really very glad that you did the posters that we were able to install, and that you're here this evening. And yes, I will bring this up, I continue to bring this up to Busboys, because I think they were interested in the panel. It just, there's 9 locations, and this goes crazy. But there's also the Anti-Racist Institute at American University. Are you familiar with them? I really want to introduce you to those folks up there, because I think that would be also some great conversations, because they're looking at community involvement, and they're at American University, anti-racist something or another. And I'll send you Kaylee Brownwell. I think I'll share that information.
Please.
Because I think that's a good space as well.
Thank you, Captain.
So, yes, sir.
I have there's a lot of food around, so people are eating. I wanted to throw in a thought.
Okay, because I know we're gonna probably need to wrap up, because I know they're getting ready to have a poetry slam in here in a few minutes, around 8-ish.
Okay,
So
we
I know
probably
they-
have another.
But go ahead and keep eating, because I know if we need to, we may have to move you out in the middle room, in the main gallery. But I want to thank you all for coming. Thank you all for allowing us to share our thoughts and his voice and his thoughts that hopefully are maybe stimulating you to think about democracy and how you see it forthcoming. So thank you.
Thank you, Carol. If you are eating, should we find tables there? If people are eating.
Get to the devil movie out there when they're ready.
Okay, so don't worry if you're still eating, they will help move us to tables.
Yes.
So don't worry about that. And you know where I am, you can always meet me, or you have a break, and folks, in case you are interested, read your cards, and my posters are on the website, and I would love it for you folks to, pass the word around. And if you want to buy, I'm not going to sell them to you, Much pressure. You don't restrain yourself. There you are. Okay, let's keep it going. Okay, like so. That is your good. Oh, it's the other in-laws.
We did.
Thank you.
We actually went on coverage.
Thank you, my dear. Really appreciate it. I'll just sign off from this. Oh, right, right. Thank you.
I'll send you the file.
Okay.
Or you can just have it now.
Okay, sure. Is it loading or do we need to? USB?
Is it IC recording? Music? Music? No. Is it USB driver? Oh, REC file. REC. Actually, I'll just send it.
Yeah, just send it.
I think the dates are wrong.
Yeah, don't worry.